A wheelchair millionaire, sat alone at the wedding until a single mom whispered, "Be my date tonight." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. At a wedding hall glowing with golden lights and laughter, a man in a wheelchair sat alone near the edge of the dance floor. Champagne glasses clinked. Music flowed through the air like honey. Yet for Ethan Hale, the world had grown strangely quiet. The tuxedo he wore fit perfectly, tailored by the best in Manhattan, but it felt like armor rather than comfort. Guests stole glances, some pitying, some curious, but no one approached. He was once the golden boy of New York's tech empire, a billionaire at 33, destined for magazine covers and high society galas. That was before the accident, before the car spun out on a rainy night and crushed the life he thought he knew. Now, confined to a chair, Ethan had learned that wealth could buy silence, not companionship. The woman he had planned to marry had left 3 months after his accident, taking with her half his faith in people. Still, out of old loyalty, he had come to this wedding, his former college friend's big day, and somehow found himself a ghost in his own circle. He wheeled back slightly to escape the noise. The fairy lights blurred in his reflection on the glass wall behind him. For a brief moment, he thought about leaving quietly. That was when he heard a soft voice behind him. "Excuse me, sorry, do you mind if I sit here for a second?" He turned. A woman in a simple, pale blue dress stood holding a tray of empty glasses. A single strand of hair had escaped her bun and brushed across her cheek. She looked exhausted but still kind. Her name tag read Mara Collins. "Of course," Ethan said. His tone was polite, detached, the kind you use when you expect someone to walk away soon. But she did not leave. She set the tray aside and looked toward the couples dancing under the chandeliers. "Everyone looks like they belong here," she murmured. "Everyone except us." Ethan glanced at her, slightly amused. "Us?" Mara gave a small smile. "Well, I am the single mom hired to refill champagne glasses, and you are the billionaire pretending not to care. So yes, us." He blinked, half surprised that she recognized him. "You know who I am?" "Everyone here does," she replied softly. "But I also know what it feels like to sit alone in a room full of people." For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Then the MC's voice echoed across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, the couple's first dance." Guests rose, cheering. Mara noticed how Ethan's hand tightened slightly on his wheel rim. Without thinking too much, she leaned closer and whispered, "You should not sit alone through this. Pretend for a moment. Just tonight." Her voice was gentle but sure. Then she smiled and asked, "Will you be my date tonight?" Ethan stared at her, stunned. No one had spoken to him that way in months, without pity, without calculation. Mara's cheeks flushed as if realizing what she had just said. "I mean, it is fine if you do not want to," he interrupted with a quiet laugh, the first real one in a long time. "No, I would like that." The music swelled. As couples twirled under the lights, Mara pushed his chair forward onto the dance floor, their steps moving in rhythm with the waltz. People turned, whispering, but neither of them cared. For the first time in years, Ethan did not feel invisible. And for Mara, the woman who had spent every night worrying about rent and her little boy's asthma, it felt like she had just stepped into a story she could not yet explain. Somewhere between the music and the murmurs, a fake moment had just begun, one that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of a small apartment on the east side of the city. The sound of a child's soft cough broke the quiet. Mara sat on the edge of her bed, holding a plastic inhaler to her son's lips. "Deep breath, sweetie," she whispered. The boy, no older than 6, obeyed. His name was Owen, and the pale circles under his eyes told a story Mara wished she could erase. When his breathing steadied, she exhaled in relief. Rent was due in 3 days. The medicine would run out in 1. Her paycheck from the catering company would barely cover groceries. The night before had been one of the few extra shifts she could find working a wedding she could never afford to attend as a guest. And then there was him, Ethan Hale. The image of him sitting alone in that black wheelchair had not left her mind. The way he had looked at her, surprised yet amused, when she asked him to be her date, it replayed over and over. For a moment she had forgotten who he was, forgotten the headlines, the net worth, the pity that followed his name. She had just seen a man who looked lonely. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back. Unknown number. Miss Collins? The voice was deep, steady. She recognized it instantly. This is Ethan Hale. I hope I am not interrupting. In May prediction. In May Connolly. Mara froze. Oh, no, not at all. How did you? I asked the catering company for your contact. I hope that is all right. There was a brief silence. She could hear the faint whir of machinery in the background, the sound of wheels on polished floors. I wanted to thank you, Ethan continued. Last night was the first time in years someone treated me like a man, not a headline. I would like to return the favor. She smiled faintly, unsure what to say. You do not have to thank me. It was just a dance. Maybe, he said, but it meant something to me. Then his tone shifted, businesslike yet gentle. Actually, I have a proposal. I need someone to accompany me to a few events next week. A friend suggested hiring a companion, but I thought I would rather ask someone genuine. I will of course pay you for your time. Mara's heart skipped. Pay me? Yes. Consider it temporary employment. 5 days, 5 events. You would help me appear normal again. Public image matters more than it should. She hesitated. Mr. Hale, I am just a waitress. I do not belong in your world. You belonged just fine last night, he replied quietly. Mara looked around her tiny kitchen, at the unpaid bills stacked by the sink, at Owen playing with a toy car missing one wheel. She swallowed hard. How much are we talking about? She finally asked. $50,000, Ethan said. Enough to pay your bills, I imagine. Her breath caught. That was more money than she could make in 2 years. What would I have to do? Nothing improper, he said quickly. You will attend dinners, smile for photographs, keep me company. I want the world to stop seeing a broken man in a chair. Mara's eyes softened. And what if people find out it is fake? Then let them, he said. It will still be the most honest thing I have done in months. She pressed the phone to her ear, thinking of Owen, of overdue rent, of the nights she had prayed for a miracle. All right, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. I will do it. Thank you, Miss Collins. My driver will pick you up tomorrow at 9. We will review the terms over breakfast. When the call ended, Mara sat in silence. Outside, traffic hummed, the city moving as if nothing had changed. But everything had. She reached for Owen's hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, Maybe this is our chance, baby. Just maybe. Somewhere uptown, in a glass-walled penthouse filled with the sound of quiet, Ethan Hale allowed himself the smallest smile. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning, Mara stood outside the tall glass building with a knot in her stomach. The letters Hale Industries gleamed above the entrance, catching the sunlight like a warning. She had never been inside a place like this before. The security guard greeted her politely, checked her name on the list, and guided her to the private elevator that led to the top floor. Her reflection in the mirrored wall showed a woman trying to look calm. She had borrowed a cream-colored blouse from a neighbor and tied her hair neatly, but her hands trembled as the elevator climbed higher. When the doors opened, she was met with the quiet hum of an open penthouse office that looked more like a modern art gallery than a workspace. Ethan waited by the window, dressed in a charcoal suit. The wheelchair was sleek and almost unnoticeable, a custom design that matched the minimalist decor. He smiled faintly when he saw her. Miss Collins, you came. Mara nodded, clutching her purse strap. You said 9 o'clock. I did not want to be late. Punctual. That is a good start, he said. Please sit. A woman in her 40s entered from the side room carrying a silver tray with coffee. This is Claire, my assistant, Ethan said. She will help us go over the terms. Claire placed a folder on the desk between them. The word agreement was printed neatly across the front. Mara stared at it as if it might bite. Ethan spoke calmly, his tone more business than personal. This is simply to make sure we understand each other. 5 appearances over the next 7 days. You will accompany me as my partner. You will attend dinners, a charity gala, a press lunch, and a private fundraiser. Your role is to help me reintroduce myself to the world, so to speak. Mara nodded slowly. And in return, you will receive $50,000 at the end of the week, he said. Half now, half when the agreement is fulfilled. Claire will also provide you with wardrobe, transportation, and whatever else you might need to fit the part. She hesitated. Fit the part, she repeated quietly. You mean pretend to be someone I am not? Ethan met her gaze. Yes, pretend, but not lie. You will be yourself. Just beside me. Claire handed her a pen. You may read it carefully, she said kindly. Mara opened the folder. The pages were filled with precise legal language. Clause 1. No romantic involvement beyond public appearances. Clause 2. Maintain confidentiality about personal matters. Clause 3. Attend all scheduled events unless excused by Mr. Hale. Clause 4. No media interviews or statements without consent. At the bottom was one more line written in Ethan's own handwriting. Clause 5. Be honest with me. No pretending when we are alone. Mara looked up. You wrote this last one yourself. He nodded. Contracts keep things clean, but honesty keeps them human. A vein. For a moment, the air between them felt different, less like a transaction and more like something fragile trying to take shape. Mara signed her name. Her hands shook a little. Claire countersigned as witness, then handed her an envelope. Here is your advance, Claire said, and this is your schedule for the week. Fittings start tomorrow. Mara held the envelope like it was something dangerous. This is more than I have ever seen at once, she murmured. Ethan smiled faintly. Then let us make sure it is worth it. He extended his hand, and she shook it, feeling the warmth of his skin. For a moment she forgot about the money, the nerves, the reason she had said yes. There was only the quiet steadiness in his voice when he said, Welcome to the partnership, Miss Collins. As she left the office, the city stretched out below her through the glass walls. Cars looked like silver threads weaving through the streets. Somewhere down there was her small apartment, her son waiting for dinner, her ordinary life. And somewhere behind her, in that silent office, a man who had lost everything was preparing to feel alive again. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple signature had just rewritten both of their stories. The next few days moved like a montage from someone else's life. Mara found herself walking through the revolving doors of boutiques she had only seen in magazines. Claire met her at each, fitting with polite efficiency, measuring, noting, adjusting, silk dresses, pearl earrings, heels she could barely stand in. Each outfit made her feel further from the woman who scraped together rent every month. At first she protested. These are too expensive. I cannot wear things like this. Claire smiled faintly. Mr. Hale insists. You are representing him now. Representing him. The words sounded heavy, almost unreal. When the last fitting ended, Claire handed her a slim envelope. Inside was an invitation. Charity dinner, the Hale Foundation for Innovation. The first event of the week. The very thought made her palms sweat. The following evening, a sleek black car arrived outside her apartment. Owen stood by the window, wide-eyed. Mommy, are you going to a ball? She kissed his forehead. Something like that. Be good for Mrs. Dalton, all right? Yes, Mommy, he said, waving as she stepped into the car. The ride to Ethan's penthouse felt endless. When she arrived, he was already waiting by the door, wearing a navy suit that framed his shoulders perfectly. His wheelchair gleamed under the chandelier's light. For a moment, Mara froze. She had seen him only in casual clothes, the quiet man behind a desk. But tonight, he looked every inch. The man the headlines once adored. You look beautiful, he said simply. She flushed, caught off guard. I suppose Claire deserves the credit. Claire may have chosen the dress, Ethan said with a small smile. But the way you carry it, that is all you. They rode the elevator down together, silence settling easily between them. Outside, cameras flashed as the car pulled up to the Grand Hotel entrance. Mara hesitated when she saw the crowd of photographers. I cannot do this, she whispered. Yes, you can, Ethan said softly. Just remember, everyone here is pretending about something. We are not the only ones. He reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it steadied her more than any words could. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered like frozen stars. Laughter rippled through the air, sharp and rehearsed. Mara's every instinct screamed that she did not belong here. But when Ethan introduced her, "This is Mara Collins, my guest," his tone was calm, confident, unashamed. At their table, a man with a smug smile leaned toward them. Hale, I see you have finally brought company. Did your publicist find her? Or did you? Ethan's expression stayed cool, but Mara caught the flash of discomfort in his eyes. Before she could think, she leaned forward. I work hard for what I earn, sir, she said quietly. That is something money cannot always buy. The man blinked, taken aback. Around them, a few guests turned their heads. Ethan glanced at her, surprise flickering into admiration. When the dinner ended, the crowd drifted toward the lobby for photographs. Mara helped guide Ethan's chair through the crowd, smiling when people greeted him. He nodded politely, but she could feel the tension in his shoulders. You did well, he murmured. I just spoke the truth, she replied. As they left the ballroom, rain began to fall against the glass doors. Ethan looked out at the city lights, blurred by water, and said quietly, You reminded me what it feels like to be defended, not pitied. In his life-friender, life in actus. Mara looked at him, the corners of her lips softening. Maybe we both needed tonight. He turned toward her, eyes thoughtful. Perhaps we did. When the car pulled away, the rain deepened, streaking the windows with silver trails. Mara rested her head against the seat, her heart unexpectedly light. For the first time since signing that contract, she felt something that had nothing to do with money. Somewhere inside the silence, a strange truth had begun to form. This arrangement, this carefully scripted lie, was starting to feel real. By the end of the week, Mara had survived 3 dinners, 1 press lunch, and countless polite conversations where people smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Yet the most intimidating event was still to come, the annual Hale Foundation Gala, held in a marble ballroom overlooking the Hudson River. It was the very same circle that had once celebrated Ethan's engagement, the same people who had quietly drifted away after the accident. Mara's palms were damp as Claire adjusted the clasp of her necklace backstage. You will be fine, Claire assured her. They will expect perfection. Just remember, authenticity will charm them more than polish. The raid planning map as his faces the grain to the carnivals. Ethan waited nearby, his posture straight in the wheelchair, wearing a crisp black tuxedo. His confidence looked effortless, but Mara could see the faint tension in his jaw. Ready? He asked. She smiled nervously. Not even close. He chuckled softly. Good. That makes 2 of us. When they entered the ballroom, the music softened, and a wave of whispers followed them. Photographers turned, flashes blinking like tiny stars. Ethan's hand rested lightly on the wheel, guiding himself with practiced grace, while Mara walked beside him, head held high. The master of ceremonies greeted them warmly. Mr. Hale, it is wonderful to see you back in the spotlight. Is Hen of results of the shooting in the bill to entails us? Thank you, Ethan said, his tone polite but measured. It has been a while. They mingled with donors and executives, exchanging small talk that tasted like glass clear, fragile, and cold. Then, out of nowhere, a familiar voice called from across the room. Well, if it is not the comeback king himself. Ethan stiffened. Mara turned to see Julian Burke, an investor and old friend turned rival. His smirk carried the kind of arrogance that fed on other people's discomfort. Julian's gaze slid toward Mara. And who is this lovely addition? Your therapist? Public relations hire? A few people laughed politely, unsure if it was a joke. Ethan's knuckles tightened on his wheel. Before he could respond, Mara spoke up. I am his date, she said calmly. And I am standing right here. Julian raised an eyebrow. A date? That is touching. I did not realize you were taking applications. Mara smiled, unshaken. You would not qualify, she said sweetly. He prefers people who remember what respect looks like. The laughter that followed was different this time, real, sharp, cutting. Julian's smirk faded. He muttered something under his breath and walked away. Ethan turned his head toward her, eyes glimmering with a mix of surprise and amusement. You realize you just insulted one of the most powerful men in this room. She shrugged lightly. Someone had to. It Dastian said of her product did. The rest of the evening unfolded with unexpected ease. Guests began to approach Ethan, congratulating him on his return, curious about the woman who had silenced Julian Burke with one line. They wanted to know her story, her confidence, her warmth. Later during the dinner, Mara leaned toward Ethan. Why did you invite me to this world? You could have chosen anyone. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because you are not afraid of me. Everyone else walks on eggshells, waiting for me to break. You just walk beside me." Her heart ached at his honesty. She wanted to say something comforting, but the words tangled in her throat. When the orchestra began to play, couples filled the dance floor. Mara hesitated. "Do you want to go out there?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I cannot dance like them, Mara." "Then let them watch how we do it differently." She took his hands, guiding his chair gently in rhythm with the music. The crowd's chatter softened. Under the warm lights, they moved not perfectly, but gracefully, her laughter mixing with his quiet smile. For a few minutes, the whispers stopped. People did not see the billionaire in the wheelchair or the waitress in a borrowed gown. They saw something real. When the music ended, the room erupted in applause. Ethan's gaze met hers, and in that moment, neither of them was pretending. As they left the floor, he whispered, "You were incredible." Mara smiled. "No, we were." And somewhere deep inside, the line between contract and connection began to blur so softly that neither of them noticed it had already disappeared. That night after the gala, the city was quiet under a veil of mist. The driver had already dropped Mara at Ethan's penthouse so they could review the press coverage from the event. But as soon as the elevator doors closed, the silence between them felt heavier than before. Ethan rolled toward the large window overlooking the skyline. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said softly. "Julian Burke will think twice before speaking again." Mara smiled, setting her clutch on the table. "I did not plan to embarrass him, but I will admit, it felt good." Ethan chuckled, then turned his chair toward her. "You know, I used to love these events. The applause, the attention, the deals whispered between champagne glasses. Now, I just want to get through them without feeling like a symbol of pity." Mara's expression softened. "People look at you and still see what you built, Ethan. They are just not sure how to treat you now." He looked at her for a long moment. "And how do you treat me, Mara?" Her heart skipped. "Like a person. Like someone who has been through more than most and still shows up." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound simple." "It is," she said quietly. "But people complicate simple things when pride gets in the way." A soft rain began tapping against the glass. Small, steady rhythms filling the room. Mara moved closer, watching the reflections of the city lights on the wet streets below. "It is beautiful from up here," she murmured. Ethan nodded. "It used to feel like I owned this view, now it feels like it owns me." She turned to him. "That is not true. You survived something most people never could. That is not weakness, Ethan. That is strength. It is as plain as that and plain down." And he let out a breath that sounded half like a sigh, half like a confession. "You know, the night of the accident, I was supposed to meet my fiancée for dinner. She was late, so I left early, angry. She called while I was driving. I reached for the phone, and the car flipped on the bridge. I remember waking up to silence, and then realizing that silence would follow me for the rest of my life." Mara's throat tightened. She wanted to comfort him, but words felt too small. She knelt beside his chair instead and placed her hand on his. "You are still here. That means something." He looked down at her hand, resting against his. "It means you are the first person to touch me without flinching in a long time." The rain grew louder, like the city was holding its breath for them. "Ethan," she said softly, "you do not have to keep pretending that you do not feel. You can miss what you had and still want something new." He searched her face, his voice almost a whisper. "And what if I already do?" Mara's pulse quickened. "Then maybe it is time to stop calling it a contract." Neither of them spoke after that. The air felt charged, fragile, and warm all at once. Finally, Ethan broke the silence with a small laugh. "You know, this arrangement was supposed to help my reputation, not my heart." She smiled faintly. Too late for that. When she stood to leave, he wheeled beside her to the elevator. The doors slid open, and for a moment, they just looked at each other, two people pretending for the world but telling the truth in silence. "Good night, Ethan," she said softly. "Good night, Mara," he replied. "And thank you." As she stepped into the elevator, Mara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling a strange ache there, half fear, half hope. Somewhere between the rain and the quiet confession, something had changed. The partnership that began as business now felt like a heartbeat she could not ignore. And when the elevator doors closed, she knew that neither of them would ever see their agreement the same way again. The next few days passed in a blur. News from the gala had spread quickly, and for once, the headlines carried Ethan's name with admiration instead of pity. Hale's triumphant return, and mystery woman captures attention at Hale Foundation event. Mara saw the articles while waiting in line at the grocery store. Her own face stared back at her from a glossy magazine cover beside Ethan's. The caption read, "From waitress to millionaire's muse, who is she really?" Her stomach twisted. She had not expected fame, only work. Now strangers were dissecting her life as if it were a game. When she arrived at Ethan's office later that day, the atmosphere was tense. Claire greeted her with a strained expression. "You should go in," she whispered. "It is bad." Inside, Ethan sat behind his desk, eyes fixed on the glowing computer screen. He did not look up when she entered. On the screen was a headline that froze her blood. "Source reveals contract between Ethan Hale and waitress girlfriend." Mara's voice trembled. "Oh my God. Ethan, I swear I did not." "I know," he interrupted quietly. "But the board does not." She stepped closer. "Who would leak it?" "Julian Burke, most likely," Ethan said bitterly. "He sits on the board of the foundation and has wanted me out for months." This was his chance. The door opened, and Claire entered, holding a stack of documents. "The investors are panicking. Reporters are outside the building. They are calling this a publicity scam." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration flashing across his face. "I will handle it." Mara reached for his arm. "Let me talk to them. I can explain." He shook his head sharply. "No. The less you say, the better. You should stay away until this settles." The words cut deeper than she expected. "Stay away? Ethan, I was part of this. You asked me to be." "Yes," he said softly, finally looking at her. "And that was my mistake." The silence between them thickened like smoke. Mara's chest tightened. "So that is it? You think I am a mistake?" Ethan's voice lowered. "This was supposed to help me rebuild my image, not destroy what is left of it. I cannot have you near me right now." She stared at him, disbelief and hurt mixing into something sharp. "Everything we shared? Was that just part of the act?" He looked away. "It was never supposed to be real." Her throat burned as she turned toward the door. "Then congratulations, Ethan. You finally convinced me." She walked out before he could answer. That night, Mara returned to her apartment, where Owen slept peacefully on the couch, his inhaler beside him. She sat beside her son, tears slipping down her cheeks. The envelope with the rest of her payment lay untouched on the table. It felt like blood money now. The following morning, reporters swarmed her building. Questions shouted from every direction. Was it real? Did you trick him? How much were you paid? She pulled her coat tighter and hurried inside, heart pounding. Up in his penthouse, Ethan watched the same chaos unfold on television. His assistant stood beside him. "The board is calling an emergency meeting," Claire said. "They want to suspend your public appearances. Do nay to a Gittern-style with feed." Ethan muted the sound, staring at Mara's face on the screen as cameras flashed around her. She looked frightened, cornered. For the first time since his accident, he felt something stronger than pride-regret. "Tell them I will handle the press conference myself," he said. "Ethan, that is not advised." He looked up, his voice steady but low. "It is time I stopped hiding behind contracts." When Claire left, he turned back to the window. The skyline that once symbolized victory now looked hollow. He whispered to the empty room. "You were never the mistake, Mara. I was." It is Ramley. Outside, the city kept moving, uncaring, but somewhere beneath its noise, two broken hearts waited for a chance to make things right again. 2 days later, New York buzzed with curiosity. Every news outlet teased the same headline: Ethan Hale to address the scandal live at noon. Reporters filled the plaza outside Hale Industries, cameras poised like weapons. Inside the building, the tension was suffocating. Claire hovered near the conference doors, watching Ethan adjust his jacket. His hands were steady, his face unreadable. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once you speak, there is no going back." Ethan nodded. "There never was." Their knot was rabid for mouth signs. When the clock struck 12, he wheeled himself onto the stage. Flashbulbs erupted, the crowd of journalists rising like a wave. Ethan paused behind the podium, letting the noise fade before he spoke. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice clear, firm. "Many of you have read stories about me and Miss Mara Collins. Most of them are true, but not in the way you think." The room went still. "Yes," he continued, "I did hire her. I offered her a contract to attend events with me. At the time, I told myself it was a business arrangement. I thought I was protecting my image, but in truth, I was protecting my fear. He looked down at his hands, then back at the cameras. Since the accident, I have been afraid of being seen as broken. Afraid that pity had replaced respect. But Mara Collins never pitied me. She reminded me that strength is not measured by what you lose, but by how you keep showing up. The crowd shifted uneasily. Someone shouted, "So the relationship was fake?" Ethan's lips curved faintly. "It started that way. But if you watched us at the gala, if you saw the way she looked at me, you know the truth. Nothing about that moment was staged. I may have hired her, but I fell in love with her on my own." A collective murmur spread through the room. Claire, standing backstage, felt tears prick her eyes. Ethan continued, his tone softening. "I have already transferred the full payment from that contract to a new charity, one that Miss Collins inspired. It will fund medical care for children with respiratory conditions. The first beneficiary will be her son, Owen." The room erupted in whispers and flashes. Ethan's voice cut through them again. "If you want to call someone guilty, call me guilty of hiding behind my fear, but do not call her a liar. She was the only honest thing in this entire story." He paused, scanning the room. "That is all I have to say." Without waiting for questions, Ethan turned his chair and left the stage. Reporters shouted his name, but he did not look back. Across the city, in her small apartment, Mara watched the broadcast on her television. The moment Ethan said her name, her hand flew to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision as she heard him speak about Owen, about the charity, about love. When the press conference ended, the screen filled with the image of Ethan leaving the hall to a standing ovation. For a man who had spent years hiding from the world, it looked like redemption. That evening, as rain swept across the city again, a car pulled up outside Mara's building. Claire stepped out, holding a sealed envelope. "He wanted you to have this," she said, handing it over. Inside was a simple note written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. "I am done pretending. Meet me where it all began." Mara stared at the message, her heart racing. She knew exactly where he meant: the wedding hall, the place where she had first asked, "Will you be my date tonight?" Hours later, she stood at the same spot, the chandeliers dimmed and the room empty. The door opened, and Ethan wheeled in quietly. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, memories flickering between them like light through glass. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "The press, the charity." "I did," he said gently, "because the truth matters more than pride, and because you matter more than both." The grabble in him, tears filled her eyes. "Ethan." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the same folded contract they had signed weeks ago. With a small smile, he tore it in half. "Our deal is officially over," he said, "but if you will allow it, I would like to start something real." Mara laughed through her tears. "Are you sure you can afford me?" He smiled. "You are priceless." For the first time in a long time, Ethan Hale felt lighter, like a man who had not only reclaimed his name, but his heart. And beside him, Mara realized that sometimes the only way to find what is real is to start with what was fake. 1 year later, the Hale Foundation for Pediatric Health opened its first clinic in downtown Manhattan. The building shimmered with glass and light, its lobby filled with families, doctors, and press. Banners read "Hope Heals," a gift from Ethan Hale and Mara Collins. Ethan sat near the entrance, dressed in a tailored gray suit, his wheelchair gleaming under the bright lights. The moment the doors opened, applause rippled through the hall. Reporters leaned forward as he took the microphone, his voice steady and warm. "When I started this foundation," Ethan said, "I thought I was building something to repay a debt. But what I have learned is that gratitude is not a debt, it is a bridge. And today this bridge belongs to every family who has ever prayed for a miracle." His eyes found Mara standing near the crowd. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely tied back, her son Owen holding her hand. The boy's cheeks were pink with health, no longer the frail child she once feared to lose. Ethan continued, his gaze never leaving them. "This clinic is not just about medicine, it is about second chances. And I would not be standing here today without the woman who taught me that love, real love, has nothing to do with contracts or appearances. It is about showing up when the world walks away." The crowd fell silent. Even the cameras stopped clicking for a heartbeat. Mara's eyes shimmered with tears. After the ceremony, Ethan rolled toward her through the crowd. People stepped aside, smiling knowingly as they passed. When he reached her, Owen grinned up at him. "Mr. Hale, Mommy says you built this place for kids like me." Ethan smiled gently. "No, Owen, your mom did that. I just helped." The boy laughed and ran off to explore the balloons near the snack table. Mara shook her head, laughing softly. "He is going to tell everyone he knows the man on the building sign." Ethan smiled. "He should. The best stories start with truth." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the crowd faded into a warm blur. Then Ethan's tones softened. "Mara, there is one more thing I wanted to do today." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it, a silver ring with a single diamond, elegant and understated. "Do you remember what you said that night at the wedding?" he asked quietly. "You asked me to be your date, just for one night." Mara nodded, smiling through her tears. "I remember." He took a slow breath. "Well, I am asking now for every night, for every tomorrow." Mara pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "Ethan," he smiled. "Mara Collins, will you be my date forever?" The crowd around them hushed again, then burst into applause as she nodded, tears falling freely. She bent down and wrapped her arms around him, laughing and crying all at once. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Owen ran back at that moment, clapping his hands. "Does this mean we are a family now?" Ethan's voice broke with emotion. "Yes, buddy. It means exactly that." The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. The billionaire who once sat alone at a wedding, now holding the woman and child who had given his life back its rhythm. As they turned toward the crowd, sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, scattering across the marble floor like 1,000 blessings. Later, when the guests had gone and the clinic doors closed for the night, Ethan and Mara stood by the window overlooking the city. The skyline glowed against the twilight, the same city that had once watched them fall and rise again. Mara leaned against him, her voice quiet. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" Ethan smiled. "Every day. You said, 'Will you be my date tonight?' And I said yes. I just did not know it would be forever." She laughed softly, her head resting against his shoulder. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars, and somewhere deep in that endless hum, two souls who had once signed a contract now stood side by side, not as employer and employee, not as a man in a chair and a woman struggling to survive, but as equals who had found love not by accident, but by choice. Because in the end, what began as a performance had become the most honest story either of them had ever lived.